Welcome to the Brandinc PR Podcast, where we dive deep into the stories and strategies of today's most impactful entrepreneurs, business leaders, and professionals. Whether you're building your brand, scaling your business, or just looking for inspiration, you're in the right place. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Brandinc PR Podcast. I am your host, Brandy Sims, back for another week of hot topics in the PR and communications world. This week, I feel like it's been so long since I've spoken with you all last, but this week, I really want to get into the sports side of things. I don't think we've had a lot of sports topics over the last couple of weeks that we've shared this podcast. So I want to get into sports this week. Obviously, Super Bowl happened this previous week, which I hope everyone tuned in. I mean, according to the ratings, you did. And it was pretty awesome to see the Eagles go and take the crown. Not even gonna lie. I'm definitely a bandwagon fan. I'm not typically an Eagles fan. I'm actually a Titans fan. I'm from Nashville, Titans till I die, okay? And I don't want to hear any jokes afterwards, okay? We've just had a couple tough years, but we're going to be back on top. But I digress. So totally a bandwagon fan. I just wanted to see someone else take the crown. So it was kind of cool to see the Eagles come through and do their thing. So definitely with that in mind, there's been a lot of hot things going on in terms of sports. And really, I was kind of surprised when I actually found this article where it kind of tapped into sports comms, because we don't hear a lot about sports comms. I know with my work with the Public Relations Society of America's Entertainment and Sports section, I deal with a lot of sports people, and even myself, having worked with an athlete, an NFL player just several years ago. Definitely, it's always good to hear those topics, but it's definitely a very segmented group and a very small group that even exists, right? So in finding this article, I thought it was really, really interesting. And it was something I definitely wanted to tap into today and talk a little bit further about. And just overall what the role of sports organizations is in terms of crisis comms. So I feel like I'm giving a lot of innuendos. Let's get into what, this event and what's happening and what this is really about. So there was a recent event that took place, and I found this in an article, was reading up on it, and I thought it was really interesting. But apparently, the New Orleans Saints and the Pelicans were involved in managing PR for the local archdiocese during a clergy scandal that was taking place. And so the communications team apparently was involved in this, and to the extent that they were helping to support the crisis as it was happening. So you have two very different teams, both located in the same area, obviously. But you've got NFL and you've got NBA that are involved. Their comms teams that are involved in this particular crisis that's really more relative to the community and not so much relative to the sports organization as a whole and as it stands. So what's really interesting in this one, and just kind of why I wanted to talk about it, is that this is an instance where here lies the intersection between PR, ethics, and corporate responsibility in sports. Because you're seeing an instance where, one, why are we getting involved in this? Has nothing to do with us, but we've made it a point to be involved. And here are reports and actual I don't know the best word to say it, but here are actual documents that are showing that, not only were we involved, but we were actively involved throughout the entire process. So we've got an issue there in terms of the ethics of that. And then, of course, corporate responsibility, when we get into, what is the responsibility of organizations to get involved in the communities that they're obviously serving, and to what do we get involved? Do we get involved when it is an abuse scandal? Do we get involved when it is potential legal ramifications? And what does that look like? So definitely excited to get into this topic and really unpack it a little bit further. And just how it's relevant to our industry and why we should be talking about this a little bit more. So to give you a glimpse and give you a better understanding of crisis comms in sports, obviously we know sports teams has a huge influence in terms of people, in terms of culture, and also financially is a big piece of that too. And that being said, their reputations, they go beyond just the field, right? They go beyond just the court. They tap into, from the finance perspective, affecting sponsorships. They affect community trust. They affect potential business partnerships. So there's a lot of connections to this that definitely makes a big difference and really reinforces why the reputation is so important and what it actually touches on as it extends beyond just what they're doing. So definitely has a huge influence, but also there's a huge reputational aspect of this too that we have to factor in and consider. So in terms of crisis comms, right, in sports, it's usually about the, player controversies, whether it is a DV situation or embezzlement or something crazy. It's usually related to like the players, or there's an issue with ownership scandals, or there is just a league-wide issue that's taken place, like CT, there's so many different areas that crisis comms typically covers. But in this case, it doesn't cover really any of those. It's not something that's a player controversy. It's not an ownership scandal or even a league-wide issue. It's something that's really community related and is actually external to the team. And so that's where I think the ethical dilemma is in this situation. Should sports teams manage external PR crisis if it's not related to them, right? And it's related to the community? Should sports team be managing PR crisis? So in this instance, and just like, again, I was reading of the article and just trying to get a little bit more insight, because I don't know about you, like I didn't see this anywhere. Like I think I was maybe so Super Bowl heavy and focused that I wasn't paying attention. But I try to subscribe to a couple different news outlets, but I didn't even see this. I found this article through BBC, and it talked about it extensively, or BBC or The Guardian. I'm sorry. Correction, it was The Guardian. But I digress. Found this article and just kind of read up on it, and there was a very extensive detail about this, and I just thought it was really interesting that it had been published like 2 weeks ago, but I had never heard about it in anywhere else. So I thought that was kind of interesting if you're a conspiracy theorist there, but I thought that was really interesting that that's the only way that I really heard or found out about this, to even learn more about it. But anyways, so in this, they're basically saying and alleging that the Saints and the Pelicans allegedly helped craft messaging, and help develop a media strategy for the church, which absolutely kind of blurred the line between sports PR and crisis management, because again, they're handling an external crisis that really doesn't have anything to do with them. But both teams allegedly helped in this instance to deal with this particular crisis. So the ethical concerns that I think arise when you have organizations that are using their influence to shape a narrative, to spin a narrative that's non-sports related, and really dealing with a non-sports related scandal. That's where kind of I think the issue really lies, is that there is a true ethical concern. What is our space and what is our involvement in the things that are going on within our communities? Should we be getting involved in these things that have absolutely nothing to do with us, and it's not really our place? So that absolutely kind of raised those concerns of the true ethical concern of their influence, and especially being at that magnitude to get involved with something as significant as this clergy abuse scandal is. So with that being said, I look at this, and the first thing that comes to mind is just the boundaries, right? There has to be some kind of boundaries. But again, before we kind of get into those boundaries and just what my thought process would be in getting the organization I represent involved in this, it would definitely start with, asking the question: should sports teams focus solely on their brand, or do they have a duty to assist in community matters, right? Is it their sole responsibility and focus only on themselves, or should they expand out to community related issues? So I think just in my experience in dealing with pro athletes and dealing with larger organizations that handle sports, I definitely would say there has to be clearly established boundaries well in advance of a crisis situation. This is how you can be proactive. There should be a clear boundary and a line. This is how far we'll go in terms of getting involved in these activities and these things that are going on within our communities. Because here's the thing, guys, when these sports organizations are entering these communities, I think it's incredibly important that they're not just there to sell their tickets. They're not just there to pull you in to attend their games and things like that. We want them to be actively involved in the communities that they're inhabiting, essentially, right? So it's absolutely something that is encouraged. We want you to get involved. We want to be involved in the community because we're not just here to just sell you. We want you to be an active participant and want you to feel like we're a part of this community as much as you are, if that makes sense, right? So, but with that being said, I think of the clear boundaries that have to be established in terms of what does that community outreach and that community involvement look like, right? You can't get involved in everything. You do want to show that you are an active participant in the community. We're a part of you guys as well. We're not just an extension, but we're a part of this community as well. But definitely think that there needs to be some clear boundaries of what is that what does that look like and how far are we willing to go with that? Because there are those instances, like in this case, where do we really want to be aligning ourselves with the potential scandal? And then, we get into a clergy abuse scandal, which has its own connotations and ramifications that could be potentially involved as far as the association with this. So definitely some boundaries I think are really, really important in this instance. And it's something that should have been discussed right out the gate before getting involved at all. You have to know what your clear boundaries are before you speak on certain things and get involved into certain things. But while sports organizations are absolutely encouraged to be involved in the community, that organization absolutely has to be the one to determine what are the boundaries set and how far are we willing to go with this thing. Just saying. So in this instance, so you have this situation that's happened, and I imagine it's slowly going to pick up a little bit more in the news. But then again, this thing has been out for like 2 weeks, and I'm just now kind of learning more and reading more about it and just kind of what has been shared and confirmed and alleged thus far. So, with that being said, there's a potential that this could grow legs and kind of push towards more major headlines. But with that, what are the risks that are associated with this and it getting out, getting further along and growing some legs, right? I think there's a reputational risk that's associated with this. Being associated with a crisis that's outside of your area of expertise, as well as your area of product and services, has always the potential that it can backfire on you. That is absolutely something that can happen. Because again, I'm just now kind of reading about this, but there's the potential that this could get bigger and bigger. And that's going to take a huge, huge hit to both of the organizations because, again, we have to ask the question, why are you involved? What sense did this make? And how does it align with your own mission and values of your organization? Like, how does this align with that to be involved in something to this magnitude? So there is that potential that it could backfire supporting this abuse scandal as it was going on allegedly. It definitely can have those ramifications in that there could be backfire, and it could absolutely backfire to not to their advantage, and it can actually hurt their reputation as it continues on. There's obviously the potential that fans and stakeholders may see this as an overreach, which I could absolutely see that as well, or even consider it as, or even look at it really, I should say, as an attempt to cover up something, when there's not really clear again, boundaries. And there's not really clear parameters here. You kind of leave things up for interpretation. And that's going to run the risk of more questions, more concerns, and more digging, right? And what we don't want is people to come up with their own conclusions, come up with questions that don't make sense. That's where, as communicators and as leaders in organizations, we have to clearly and effectively communicate why we are moving the way that we're moving, why we're making the decisions that we're making. And I think something like this could absolutely present that concern there, is that, okay, this is an overreach. And especially looking at fans and stakeholders, they could look at this as an overreach. What are you guys doing in this space? Like, this has nothing to do with us. So why are you getting involved? Or it could be the latter, where it's, assumed, or, you know, um, allege that maybe you guys are involved. Is that why you decided to get involved? All these things are potential questions that could be asked that you really don't want to have to deal with, and that absolutely can present a reputational risk if you don't address it effectively and concisely. And then finally, this is kind of, and I know I've talked about this, I've spoken with other professionals about this, about the importance of this particular area, but this is why transparency and authenticity, it matters so much in crisis response. A couple weeks ago, I talked about the Jay-Z response and the alleged allegations against him, and just how to do it more effectively, and what tweaks could be made to improve that response. And this is why, the authenticity, the transparency, it does matter in these instances. This is why people need to know these things. They need that transparency in your communication, because when something does happen, there aren't these questions of, well, that's a bit odd that you're involved in this. Why would this sports organization want to be involved or associated with a clergy abuse scandal? And why would you be assisting them anyway? It has nothing to do with sports. When you get those questions that kind of target the integrity of the organization, you've got a problem. But all of that can be stemmed from and directly tied into lack of transparency. And this is why, when you're dealing with a situation like this, it's important that when you are providing that crisis response, that you are dealing with it fully authentically, but also providing that transparency so it can clarify any area that may be of concern or could potentially be brought up, that could present a reputational risk for you. It's all about being proactive. I don't know if I can emphasize that enough in this episode. It's all about being proactive in your communication. You have to have those clear boundaries, and you have to be operating on a very true, transparent, and authentic approach in order to deal with and mitigate these types of risks that could be devastating for your organization. So, what best practices? In this instance, and of course, many instances in crisis PR in sports, do we want to apply in these situations that we find ourselves in, right? So, the first question I want to ask is, if a sports organization gets involved in crisis comms, what are the best approaches? Okay. So, what are the key takeaways? So, number one, if a PR professional is managing a high profile brand, um, you need to be very clear about staying within ethical boundaries. Like, I'm going to repeat that. If you are dealing with a high profile brand, you need to stay within ethical boundaries. And I want to tie that also into those that may not have a high profile brand that they're representing, or you are that high profile brand that is dealing with the situation. You always need to reinforce and remember this. You have to stay within your ethical boundaries, because that does matter from a reputational risk standpoint, from an image standpoint. Brands do rely on that integrity because the fans rely on that integrity. If you demonstrate that you can't be trusted, then guess what's going to happen to sales? What's going to happen to attendance? What's going to happen to other areas that impact your bottom line for your organization? It's going to impact all of those areas. So operating on a basis of integrity and operating with and within ethical boundaries is a huge, huge piece of this that can help prevent a lot of the damage that these crisis situations that happen from really impacting you. This is how you can kind of mitigate that. The second thing I would say is you need to really prioritize the transparency and authenticity, as well as accountability of your brand. So we're already in the mud. We're already here. It's already out there, right? Now is the time that you can turn the tides, okay, a little bit into your favor by offering up that transparency, especially if you haven't been transparent in the past or have not showcased that in the past. This is your opportunity to really be transparent about your involvement, if allegedly, if there is some kind of tie-in into your mission and values, why you're supporting this or not supporting this per se. This is your opportunity to really offer that clarity so that you can still protect the interests of the organization, but also the trust of your fans and your stakeholders, which is an important element to this. It's also about accountability. This is your opportunity to be accountable. If this did happen and you were wrong in the situation, this is an opportunity to be accountable in that, address the issue. And then from there, you can properly move on. But not being accountable and not being transparent is going to create further issues as the story continues to unravel. So try to get ahead of this by offering up that transparency and that accountability that makes a difference. The next thing, and I kind of already touched on this, is aligning with the values of your organization, and specifically with your fan base and your stakeholders, because they matter. Their opinions matter, their thoughts matter. They are ultimately what's keeping this organization alive and thriving. So it's very important that you align with the values that they expect from you, but really that they present and they say that is important to them. They want an organization that they can trust. They want to support organizations that they can trust. And part of that is being and making sure that you're aligning those values with those exact beliefs that they have. And then finally, be prepared for public scrutiny. It's already out. We're already muddy. It's already out there. So now you've got to be prepared for the backlash. If that backlash comes, in what wave and what volume it will, you've got to be prepared for that, especially when as a sports organization, you decide to get involved with certain community crises, as well as scandals that could potentially impact you. You've got to be prepared for potential public scrutiny, especially when it's totally not related to what it is that you do and you offer. You've got to be prepared for that. So hopefully you have some tough skin to deal with that. All right, so I've hit on a lot of points with this. The importance of being accountable, the importance of values within the organization, setting boundaries. All of these things, I want to remind you, can be applicable to you and your organization. So it's not just limited to sports. I know this is very much a sports organization and crisis comms PR's topic, but I want you to find in all of this that I've kind of talked with you about, how important it is to view these situations not from such a top level to down, but think of it as some of this stuff can actually apply to you too. We all deal with crisis in our own different ways. The level of the crisis, the volume of that crisis obviously is going to look different, but we're all dealing with crises within our own respective organizations, no matter the size. And what we do with that situation, what we do with that crisis is very much going to either help, make, or break the organization. So all of these tips and all of these key points and really takeaways that I have for you are very much in line, and I want you to feel like it's very much in line with your organization. How can I apply this to my organization as it stands today? How can I be more proactive in terms of a crisis? A crisis is always on the horizon. So what you need to do is make sure that you have a plan, a clear approach to how you're going to deal with it as it presents itself. So I definitely want to leave you with this question. Should sports organizations take on external crisis PR roles, or should they just stay in their lane? I want to hear your feedback. Let me know in the comments. Let me know by sending us an email. I want to hear your thoughts on this. And definitely want to encourage you to share your opinion, either through social media or via email. But this has been amazing to talk about. I'm going to be continuing to stay tuned on this topic because I think it's very interesting. This crisis comm situation in sports PR, that is very much building as it's coming along, but very interested in this topic because there's a lot of layers and areas to factor and consider in dealing with it, and as well as how would you approach that situation. So definitely love to hear your feedback, love to hear from you. And until next time, I'll see you guys next week for the Brandinc PR Podcast.